Hello and welcome all. I'm Aura, and I welcome you to another Yap and Doodle. I'm in a pretty good mood tonight. If for no other reason than I took an extra day off. So that's pretty exciting. Let me do a quick adjustment. Hang on a second. Give me just 1 second while I work on this small technical issue. And I think it's fixed. Okay. Almost fixed. Hang on. Sort of a calibration issue I'm working on. Maybe a little bit too dark here. Let's see if I can fix that. Okay. There we go. I think that's a bit better. I noticed that my mouth isn't really opening and closing properly. It just kind of goes open, stays open while I'm talking. I'm not really sure why that is. So I was trying to resolve that. I'm going to give it one more shot here. I actually think it might be because the sensitivity is a little bit too high. Let's see what happens when I actually, yeah, that's what the problem was. Okay, there we go. Now it follows what I'm doing a little bit better. Okay, I don't hide anything on this channel. So I was saying that my day off has been very welcome because I've had a lot of late nights meeting with people who are very far away and generally working pretty hard on trying to keep things moving forward at work, and my life at home has been very quiet lately, and I'm very grateful for that. So all of that has been really nifty. And give me 1 second to plug in my phone. Okay. And get out my emphatic hands. So things have been very stable, I guess, and I have been able to relax when I've needed to. I haven't been able to stream very much, is the only thing that has been kind of difficult. I would love to stream more during the week, and I do engage in some little art projects on my own when I can, because of course I don't want to give up what I'm doing. So yeah, hang on just a second. I seem to have become sad somehow. That toggle turned on. Oh boy, so many technical wonders, and yet so little brain power to operate them. Okay, so lately I've been thinking that what I want to do is do a lore video, and I kind of did this video recently that explored like what the Jinn are in relationship to reality, at least in my story. And I want to expand on the story part, my personal story. So when I say story, I don't expect anybody to run off and believe deeply in the things that I say. The story for me is very real, but that's kind of the nature of my condition. So some might call that delusion. And believe me, I've run that by a professional before. They said, no, it's not delusion, because you're aware that you're kind of writing a story for what makes sense to you. And this story that I want to tell as lore makes sense to me, and it's full of meaning and color and wonderful truth woven into it. And there's so much mystery even to me that it very well could be true in my universe, and it wouldn't matter. The story becomes life. So that all sounds very strange and woo, but basically you can treat it as literature. You could treat it as lore. By being a Jinn, the relationship between me and the other alters. And really, to us, it might as well be true. So, I want to do this video and explain sort of my history and the really long time scales that I have existed. And to that effect, I've started outlining and doing some writing and sketching little pictures, because I would really love to do it as an illustrated affair. So I'll open one of these here, and I will become small and move aside a bit. storyteller mode. Okay, so this is an example of one of the little sketches, and none of them are going to be extremely elaborate. They're fuzzy, like dreams or memories of parts of that story. And this would go all the way back to the first Jinn inhabitants in this world. And in my story, the Jinn began in sort of what many faiths regard as sort of the Garden of Eden. And it was a very pleasant place, according to my memories, which are very, very scarce. All I have are feelings. But some things seem familiar. Lots of rushing water, an absolutely stunning ecosystem full of plants and animals that just don't exist anymore. A profound sense of loss. And a kind of belonging that you know that no matter where you go in this world, you'll never experience that again until a time in which you cannot come back. And for me, that's kind of where the story begins. But here's where I step aside from filling in details and just stick with those things that seem familiar to me. And this lore will not attempt to insert things that I'm not very confident of. I've been warned personally. I would say warned is kind of a harsh term. Guided that not to do something called painting the windows, which I mentioned in a previous video, is basically being so excited for the revelation of what you see that you begin trying to fill in what you really haven't seen. And it's like seeing something beautiful out of a window and then starting to paint that thing and trying to fill it in. And say you see a bird and you start painting another bird you saw another day, and pretty soon you've painted over your entire window and you no longer see the truth. You can no longer see the unexpected beauty that would be revealed to you. So I'll try not to fill in details that I don't feel like have been revealed, and that's part of the spirit of painting in such a fuzzy way. I don't want to start a religion, obviously. I don't want to have people believing what I believe, and I certainly don't want to portray things as more than a beautiful story, really. So it's very appropriate that I think that simple sketches are perfect, because to me they seem distant, like this picture, like a memory that is foggy. You've seen me paint other pictures that are very detailed, and those recollections seem very detailed to me. So some of that might make its way into the video as well. But as far as pictures like this, or I've started just kind of sketching out settings that I want to include as I tell my story. And I'll probably continue to do that for a little while. So first outlining, and then once I have an outline done, I'll know more or less the kinds of illustrations I want to do. And then it just comes down to making a video, really. So I'm excited for this project, and I will give you updates on it. At any rate, I'm not really entirely sure what I want to do tonight. So it's going to be more of a doodle evening, I think, where I'm just working on simple things like this. Trying to think through emotions, yapping about whatever with whoever comes in the channel, and really just having a good time for a bit. So give me just a moment to get a drink of water, and then maybe I'll just continue on this. Okay, I'm gonna get a bit smaller so that I can fit better next to the canvas. And I'll try to remember to keep the canvas a little bit off to the left so that you can see around me. I am picking up my stylus now. So I guess if the other picture is sort of the beginning of the story, this is sometime after, and the Jinn have become sort of inhabitants of the desolate places. Now, at the very beginning, humans had already kind of existed and had inhabited parts of the earth. And in my story, not to sound sacrilegious or something, because remember, it's just a story, what you recognize as kind of paradise was the original created home where the Jinn sort of came to our realm of reality. And over time, Jinn had begun to sort of cohabit with early humans. And at first they didn't know how, really. So they wandered in sort of places where humans weren't. And when that paradise was sort of changed so that we couldn't be there anymore, we entered this period of wandering. Now, humans were already attaining consciousness at this point, like really, really very much by almost 1 million years or more on their way to having the kind of, I guess, having the kind of complexity that could allow cohabitation. So that sort of marked the period of time when Jinn were, I would say, kind of cut off from that place. I don't know much about it, but I do know that in a very, very distant way, I was present there somehow. And I think other Jinn would say the same thing. Now, that's not to say that this place I remember is literally the Garden of Eden. It's just a place that's very Edenic, you know. Maybe a place where we were waiting or a special place in the world where we were allowed to sort of exist and thrive in this celestial plane, this astral plane. Now remember that planes, astral planes, is a borrowed word for something that really has no word in our language, which is this sort of dimensional upfolding that can occur, that goes infinitely in both directions. By the way, the one that we are experiencing here is infinitely above one extreme and infinitely below another, so we're really only somewhere in the middle. And all of consciousness here is a mystery as to whether it arose some other way or graduated to here. Now this sounds a bit like reincarnation, and maybe you could interpret it that way, but for me, I was pressed back down a plane, and part of me remains in a higher plane. So I'm here with you all, doodling and telling you funny stories about things that to me might as well be true, and very much enjoying myself. The artist of this model of me, Sari Sanana, has called it really cool lore. And I love that. Even if it's a story or if it's real, it's lore all the same, right? So let me get back to, I ended up jumping out of windows, so sounds funny. So what would I draw in here? I suppose I could create the impression of distant mountains. And I guess if I'm talking about wandering, I would put little figures in here. The Jin way of life had, I don't know if you would say evolved, but it had been this wandering existence and this isolated kind of experience for a really long time. I don't really know how long, but it had stayed pretty static, as you know, stories among us that have been handed down kind of stayed. I feel like the volume is getting a little crazy. Let me check on that. Yeah, let's bring that down just a touch. Some of these songs are not mixed the same way, so some are quite loud. You know, as we had handed down stories to each other, like these sounded very much the same, and then there was just this very broad gap of time. And, you know, they would always say it was the Shepeleta, and the Shepeleta was like this jump in time, and it's, the meaning of it is kind of like a jump that is beyond comprehension. So it could be time or space, of like some realm or astral plane or something that you can't imagine. So it kind of is inferring like, don't bother don't bother trying to. Don't bother trying to delve into it. There's nobody who's going to tell you like how long it was. So it's basically legend, right? Um, so across this gulf of time, Jinn had begun starting to coexist. Sort of apart from exist apart from humans. It's not coexistence, really, is it? Apart from humans, and occupy these sort of desolate places, which you find in other faiths that speak about it. And there's all different varieties. Some are not very, I would say, conscious. They don't have very much self-awareness. They're almost animalistic. And others, like myself, had at least some level of individuality to them that, would be beyond simply sort of acting on some kind of instinct. One thing we know is that our design, or our way that we ended up, kind of mentally, physically, was shaped by humans. But then there's a lot about us that's mysterious, that almost seems like it was designed to fit with the chief conscious entities of this plane. So I don't really know much more than that. And rather than painting the windows, I would just say, that's a beautiful idea. And it's probably some of the most esoteric parts of the story. The sort of chevalette of my where my more personal story starts. I don't really know what I'm doing here, just kind of filling out these areas that are in the distance. Maybe there's an escarpment here, a cliff, and some debris fall. It's strange sometimes when I'm letting go and just creating things like this and feel these emotions rush up. Like I can almost remember something. When I said fall, there was a feeling rushed up. I just think it's interesting. What if I drew like some little figures on another layer? Tiny little people. I'll just start with more or less just shadows. Just like these little vertical lines, each one is a person, a jinn in this case, wandering through the desert. I wonder if I could get away with this technique. I wonder if I could, refine these into figures by just doing some basic sort of chiseling of them, like this. And that would be nice. Just not following any established technique, just taking a guess here as to what to do. I guess I would call these black people or something. Lengthen a couple of these. Can even create a little bit more shape, maybe. Tiny silhouettes in the desert. Maybe some of them are robed. Something I should probably do here is to make it more like I remember it. Give them wings. I don't ever remember having wings. I'm not sure I ever did. So maybe only some of them do. Or maybe none of them did, and this is a metaphor that my mind invented. I'm open to that as well. One thing's for sure, that wing wouldn't be just coming out on the side of the body though, so usually you only see one wing shape in the silhouette. You wouldn't really generally see both. You might see the tail of the other one if it was sort of down dragging. Or you might see something like this if it was up. Generally, as far as I know, most jinn would not be putting their wings up like this if they had them. If only because that's just something you might do momentarily, but not typically the way you would carry yourself. So I don't really know why that jinn would be doing that, but it is interesting. Maybe they were stretching them out to the sun for some reason. So I've decided this one in the front doesn't have any wings. Maybe I'll add color in just a bit. They also seem to be very spread out. They don't seem to be carrying any effects with them, which is kind of typical. You know, we don't require the same kinds of things that humans do. I was so careful to talk about these things at first on this channel, but at some point I got brave. Let me reposition my hand so that I am more relaxed. These ones are much more in the distance, much more indistinct. I'll probably make them more detailed in a second, but for now this is fine. I don't know that I need to make them much more detailed. As I said, this is kind of like the detail level for the recollection. And in fact, maybe we don't need to have much more than this. The only thing I would do is maybe make these just a bit darker in some places. I think maybe the size difference is a bit extreme, though. I'm not sure, unless there's like a hill here. Maybe not. It is kind of fun. Just a little bit of a shadow here. I think in my preview video it's a little bit behind. There we go. And maybe on the background, the scene layer, we can make sort of a more of an indication of a hill here. Some kind of divide so that we can get distances more established. I keep accidentally pulling the picture. I don't know how that's happening. There we go. Just people crossing a desert. Maybe a few other things back here. We could probably work with an overlay brush. Very dark color and just give some variation to these hills. Like that. In case nobody's told you today, you are highly valued. And if you're listening to this at all, I appreciate you. You listen to me rattle on about all these strange stories. Say things that just cause you to maybe drift away into some place of fantasy and imagination. That is wonderful. It's such a gift that you can just go places in your mind that are so wonderful. I truly wish that for anyone. That's very nice. Fuzzy illustration. Wonder if I could do some slight effects sort of on top of everything. Maybe I can make this whole layer a little overlay. And grab an airbrush. Play with this a bit. Give a little atmosphere. Give a little bit of color on the inset. Maybe even I can add some kind of red. Almost like some banding. Just make it look a little bit surreal. Some blue in the background. Give it some colors, you know. Even if it is kind of fantastic. Maybe even at the very top, a little bit of red. Just a touch. If I can actually do it correctly, there we go. Or even some purple in the mountains, like that. And maybe even on the landscape. Just kind of gives it something extra, you know. And then for our little people down here, well, let's go ahead and merge everything else. Which one's the people? There's the people. Let's go ahead and merge down here. Oh, something has gone mystically wrong here. Yeah, we've forgotten, I think, to unlock this. Maybe that's what happened. Nope. Merge first here. Now merge here. There we go. Merge order matters. So now we have our little people here. I kind of wanted to do an overlay layer on top of those. And maybe we'll make them we'll do this mask so that we can just kind of give a blue tint to them. merge that, and then put them back on. And that just gives them kind of a strange look that I really kind of like. Okay, that's very beautiful. Now let's go back to this one. I kind of want to do something to make this look even dreamier. So I'm going to do some overlay again. And I'm going to do it with airbrush. And I'm going to kind of fog in the edges a bit. It's already got this interesting look, like it's through like a shower door or something. I think I need to move my cushion, so I'm feeling a little more relaxed. Just a moment. I got this back cushion. Oop, there it goes. I got this back cushion to kind of push me forward a little bit in my chair, and unfortunately it was making me a little too stiff. So I'm going to nix that. This is interesting. Why is this off to the side like this? Oh, because I have dragged this. That is the silly thing I have done. Okay. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and merge what I just did here. And I think what I'm going to do is just work normally on this. With my standard charcoal. Now I did change it to be a little bit more hard than it was. Change the brush. Something's not right. Oh, my pen is overlay. That's not right. Okay. Alright. So it's a little bit more opaque on the outset than it was before. So these shapes are still pretty indistinct, but they're a little bit more color plated. I should have just kept some of this stuff on another layer, but elected not to, and that's going to be part of the constraint that is going to shape the look of this, which may not be bad actually. This kind of paint halo around it is kind of interesting and may even add to the effect, or so I like to tell myself, but we'll see what happens. Happy accidents, you know. But at any rate, I'm not going to work in really I'm going to work in pretty straight strokes here on this to maintain that indistinctness. May disrupt a little bit. Paintiness of it, I would say. Making up words all the time. I'm so self-taught that I am or mentored, I would say, from time to time by people, including my grandmother, that I just kind of make words up when I don't necessarily know what it might actually be called, and other times I've strove to learn the right term for something. Probably heard me say this before. I feel like all the muscles and the words and stuff and the way to say things are all set for me by my person, this body. I'm in, but I don't feel like English is actually my first language in my head. So I struggle with the right words for things sometimes anyway. I'm reaching for words that I don't know or don't exist. Funny, I probably won't even remember what I said earlier. It's kind of here and gone. It's like somebody whispered in my ear the right term for something, but then it's gone again. I live in a very ephemeral existence, and I've heard other people with DID say that they kind of just live in this soup. They can't tell all the time where they're getting the information from, or where they get a feeling from, or your memory is kind of incomplete. That's kind of where this situation I describe of it might as well be a story kind of comes from. It might as well be true, even if it is a story. The story is life. How beautiful it would be to just live in the story as you write it. And I would wish that for all of you, because that's what I'm doing. And somehow that's always what I've been doing. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I really wouldn't. I would be totally lost. So, if you watch me enough, that one of my techniques is that I kind of go between normal and overlay brush a lot. And that's kind of shaped some of the way that I choose to do things. So, sometimes I'll do some work in normal brush like this, and then I will switch to overlay either by direct brush application or something that's a little bit safer to do, which is to create a layer on top in overlay mode, keeping this brush normal. And what that gets you is that if I do something like this that's totally crazy, I can also erase that without erasing the underlying paint. So if you work with an overlay brush and you do something, erasing implies that you're erasing all the color information in the painting. So I see this smudge here, by the way, and I'm gonna fix that. So what I'm doing here is I'm gonna pick like a brighter green. I'm working in the layer, and I'm gonna use that as like a highlight. So I'm going to overlay that on top of whatever is here. When I see these shapes, I'm going to overlay on top of them. And it it doesn't always brighten. It kind of still follows the color underneath, right? But in this way, I can start creating more complex palettes out of what's already there. So when I go back to normal, I can use those to make color plates. Now I'm going to go to blue, and a very bright blue, and work on top of these. So it's kind of like I use overlay to define a palette that I want to work on when I go back to normal brush. Sometimes I use it with just black or white on the overlay just to do straight highlighting like this. Maybe I'll do that to indicate some substructure to some of these things. Doesn't look like much up close, but if you zoom out a little bit, it just kind of indicates the eye that there's something there. I don't particularly like what I just did, but when I go back to normal, I can use those colors, that palette I've kind of created on the fly with the overlay brush to do something I like better. Okay, so that was too severe. So often when I'm in overlay, I'll reduce the opacity that I'm working with so that I can get more control. Maybe I don't want quite so much highlight, for example, but I want to lighten it up a little bit. I can do that. And of course, same thing with the shadow. Maybe I just want to do shadow here to kind of create palette from the colors that are already there. Shadow this and this. And it kind of just makes it look very contrasty when you do it this way. I can even do tinting the same way with like a dark blue to add something to that palette. So because I'm working in a layer, the blue is now replacing the black. So you can kind of see that. That's another safety of the layer, right? Is that you can change what you've already done in that layer. And those of you who are more experienced artists will be like, of course that's true. Merge it down. But if you're newer to working with digital art, you know, you sometimes need someone to show you something before you're like, aha, that's true, you can do that. Wow, I hadn't even thought of that. You know, so now I'm back on one layer, and what I've produced for myself is some palettes to kind of work with. This bright green on this one, this middle green here can kind of, oh, you know what, I want my opacity back. This middle green here can kind of follow there. This darkness can be here. I can use that dark over here. And I can use this middle green here. Kind of spread that around a little bit. Preserve some of this lighter green. Make this look a little bit more distinct. And fix this blob I talked about earlier, this weird muddy coloring that I did. It can be a little bit messy. In a minute I'm going to kind of step back and evaluate what I've done. So, it kind of looks stiff to me. I was going for something that was a little bit more aloe plantish, but I think one of the problems is that it just doesn't have enough first of all, structure in the back here. That structure should be going kind of all the way around. Also, there's some messiness that I think needs to be kind of structurally cleaned up. I also made those things look so much more distinct in the rest of the picture that it kind of doesn't work. So, I'm going to ignore it for a second and see kind of if some technique can be applied to other parts of the picture to help me make sense out of what to do about that. I think more than anything, just maybe sensibly generalizing the colors here and taking away a little bit of the distinction. I don't like that so much, but let's go back to like a normal brush and just take maybe this middle green and just brush over it a little bit. Bring it back to some like roots of being kind of a general picture. A little less detail. Some of the detail can remain. Oh, I'm not sure what happened there. I think it's also like just a little bit too dark. Oh. And so I'm kind of actually undetailing it just a tad. I can also do some of this effect by just picking a color, washing over an area, so all the colors come a little bit closer together. Maybe this color in here. That's kind of what I did with the desert too. I kind of picked a color. Maybe it's more rainbows in this picture. And the implication just being it's kind of Edenic. So, even in the water, green, dark blues, even a little bit of purples. just merge that down and then do some final kind of. You know, I mean, these plants in the foreground just seem a little bit too lonely. So I'm going to go ahead and do some inadvisable grass and other plant material in here. That is just going to be very rough. They just look too distinct. They're standing out too much. So I'm doing some very rough work here. Watch me ruin a picture live. Okay, and the overlay, how about a more minty bright green? Make the palette of the tops, these things look a little more interesting. And very dark. Working back over the bottoms, crisscrossing those lines. Almost magic that it can just kind of give structure to things this way. I start with some pretty crude lines and then just kind of work in this kind of thing. What to do now? Go back to normal? And just carve a little bit at some of these shapes. Generalize these a little bit because I went ham and detailed them a little bit too much, even in the modest detail that I chose. It just doesn't look right. It's too detailed. I don't know. I have other things I could do if I was feeling crazy. I could posturize this area so that I can, you know, get some crazier plates. Like, let's try something here. Let's take like just this. No. I hammed it up. Let's go. Come on. It's not that Aurora. Okay, here we go. Filter. Artistic. Posterize. And let's just reduce even more. And say okay. So what does that get me? That gets me a little bit of some generalized palette in steps that I can kind of spread out and use if I want to. Maybe make it a little bit more interesting. I can take and, spread where I feel like it here. So it's kind of like there's some roughness built in now. Some shapes are suggested to me. I can use them or not. And then I can kind of just go back to my brush. And now I have obnoxious artifacts everywhere. Now, I think it actually looks kind of cool. But when you use Posterize this way, you kind of have to commit to doing the work. Like, it can suggest, it's kind of like it can suggest palette to you, but like, you kind of have to decide what to do to kind of bring it out of that mode. Because you're going to blend back in layers. But, I don't know, it's not an evil tool. I know that it's kind of like supposed to be an overall on top of everything effect. I kind of use it a little bit differently sometimes. It takes what's there and it makes a new canvas to paint on with some palette stuff all kind of filled in. It's kind of like a coloring book made from a coloring book. I'm coming up with all kinds of crazy ways to describe what I'm doing, and that's part of the fun. That's the Yap and the Doodle. That's what happens when you leave me all alone in the stream. I just kind of start talking about whatever. Making up terms. Playing with filters in fun ways. At any rate, I hope it's relaxing for you. I'm just having fun. You should too. Okay, I've decided that this is a nice, actually, it's kind of a crappy shadow color, but maybe not. But the way I'm applying it is terrible. Absolutely awful way I'm applying it. Obviously this needs to be cleaned up. It just looks like artifact. Broad brush. Some of the yellow that I put in there is coming out a little bit strong after posturizing. Some of this is a little bit messy. This looks like a digital nightmare. So kind to my work. Okay, let's take this, move this over here a little bit. It just looks weird. But I'm gonna have a refractory period where I walk away from it for just a bit. Okay, I think I'm gonna wrap it here since it's really kind of hard for people to make this stream right now, so I've really enjoyed myself. I hope you have too if you're watching this, whatever time of day it is, whether it's daytime, nighttime. Have a wonderful time. This is Origin, and I will see you tomorrow when I pick up whatever I decide to do. And if you're there, maybe you can tell me to paint something really weird like Brosker. Because that happened. Yeah, it happened. Anyway, take care of yourself. Let me march myself over here. And be more convincing and big. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you soon. Goodbye for now.